No, it takes me a second to get my camera all adjusted. Okay, hold on a second. There we go. Okay. So, I want to talk to you about white allies. So, as I've been saying, I've been reading the book Where Do We Go From Here by Dr. Martin Luther King, written in 1967. Probably his most informative book. Like, if you only read one Dr. King book, the book to read would be Where Do We Go From Here? So he started talking about his role and interacting with a guy named Stokely Carmichael. Most of you, if you're my age and younger, you probably know him as Kwame Ture. He changed his name in the 70s. But in the 60s, he was in charge of Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. SNCC will become the Black Panthers at some point, or will merge with the Black Panthers. So he was talking to Dr. King. And SNCC had recently kicked out all the white people that were involved in SNCC. Now, the reason wasn't just because Stokely Carmichael just blindly hated all white people. That's not what happened. What happened was a lot of really educated, well-to-do white people came down from up north to join SNCC. And when they joined SNCC, they took most of the leadership roles. And they took the leadership roles because they had more education than the people in Mississippi. SNCC started, the branch that Stokely Carmichael was in charge of was in Mississippi. They did the Lowndes County Freedom Council, which registered voters in Lowndes County, which was the most racist county in Mississippi. So when these people came down, these white people came down from Mississippi, they took all the leadership roles because they had more education. And they also had more experience being in charge of things and watching people be in charge of things because their parents owned businesses or were in politics. So when they came down, they were just taking SNCC and just running with it. And they were trying to make SNCC a national organization right off the bat. Now, if they had done that, then nobody black in Mississippi could be in charge of it because it would be so cumbersome and so intricate that nobody with very little education in Mississippi could even handle it. So the way Stokely Carmichael handled it was he just kicked all the white folks out and put black folks in charge. So when him and Dr. King start talking about the Meredith Freedom March, James Meredith, he's the guy who integrated the University of Mississippi. He tried to do a solo march across Mississippi to register people to vote. He gets shot the second day he's out there. So they're going to pick up the mantle where he left off. And it's going to be SNCC, CORE, and the SCLC to go down there. And so Stokely Carmichael tried to make the case that this Meredith Freedom March should only be black people. And his reasoning behind it was part of the reason the civil rights movement has got to work is because black people have to believe that they are capable of being change agents in their own lives. You don't need a situation where black people feel like white people came down and just saved them. And Dr. King understood that problem, and he said that kicking all the white people out is wrong because there's been a lot of white people that have done a lot of stuff for the movement. So we can't just kick all white folks out. However, he agreed that it's important for black people to have leadership positions in their own organizations. And so this self-determination thing is really important. And being somewhat suspicious of white people in the movement is very important too, because Stokely Carmichael, one of the things he was saying with having this many white people involved is what happens when they betray the movement. What happens if, halfway through this, they see they're really going to lose status and position, they start to pull out or sabotage the movement or self-sabotage the movement. So black people dealing with white people, there's always going to be a certain level of mistrust. And I'm kind of relating it back to some different interactions I've had online before. And so I've seen a lot of white people. They get involved with my site, Black Leadership Analysis, the Facebook group. And the first thing they want to assert is how they aren't like all the rest of the white people. They want to assert that they're woke and they understand what's going on. And they spend a lot of time worried about when they interact in BLA or other black spaces, people being suspicious of them or calling them out on things and not understanding that they're there to help. And my rebuttal to that is when you're dealing in a black space, especially a black space where black people are trying to heal or come up with plans to move forward, you should expect a certain level of suspicion. Now, I think it's important for white people to be involved in the process so they can grow and learn too, because America doesn't change if only black people go out and change. And that's one of the things Dr. King talked about in his book also. White people have to reprogram themselves also. So if only black people are changing, that's not going to fix anything. So I want white people to be involved in BLA and the conversation. But when you're coming in, you have to understand that the primary goal of that website, that movement, that meeting is to come up with a plan to help and heal other black people. The first priority is not going to be reassuring white people that they're all right or that this white guy is different than all the other white people. And when you're going into a new space like that, you shouldn't expect everybody to like drop everything and make sure you're all right. Like, you're going to have some backbone and some thick skin and get out there and interact and work. And you have to understand that it might be that the majority of the people in that group never trust you. I mean, you can't go into a group of people who's spent a lot of their life oppressed and expect all of them to just accept you as brother automatically. There will be some that do, but a good percentage of them are always going to have a certain level of mistrust of you, and that's not because something's wrong with them. It's because they understand history. They know about things like COINTELPRO, where they sent different spies into black liberation organizations. They know about, a lot of sellouts that sold us out. There's very good reason for them to be suspicious about to you. So I'm also involved with Ambedkarite Buddhism, which is the type of Buddhism that Indian untouchables, which the more correct term is Dalit for lower class people, but Indian Dalits are involved in. And so I met up with this Indian lady online, and she hit me up on Facebook, and she was interested in that. She feels like I'm pretty involved in the movement, and they accept me being American and stuff, but she's upper caste Indian, and she feels like people don't accept and trust her when she starts trying to talk about abolishing caste and everything. And she set me up online about 2 or 3 different times talking about this. And my thing is, you can't come in to this group of people who have gone through far worse than black Americans have. The Dalits have gone through far more than we've gone through. And come in and just expect them to make the first priority acknowledging you and making you feel okay. Your first priority when dealing with these people has to be, do they have what they need? And if you end up being accepted or feeling, feeling good at the end of it, that's a bonus. But your first priority is, what do they need? And I think that's a lot of white allies dealing with black people. They have to have that same mentality. What do they need? Are they getting what they need? And, if you end up with some acceptance at the end, if you end up with some kudos at the end, that's great. But, that can't be your first priority, And I see a lot of white people moving into black spaces. Black spaces where we're there trying to help and heal each other. And they never think of it that they're having it way easier than a black guy would trying to move into a white space, even a so-called integrated space. Like, when you're trying to interact with the mainstream America, there's tons of barriers that come up. There's tons of little snide things that are said. Somebody actually might be physically aggressive to you on numerous different occasions. Like, it's a rough thing. So, you really should, instead of being like, oh, they didn't do this right by me, they acknowledged that, the focus should just be on, I have it way easier than a black guy going into a so-called white space or integrated space. So I'm just glad I get the level of acceptance that I'm getting now. And I'm happy with that. And I think it's important to keep that in mind and acknowledge that. So that's all I got to say for now.